luxurious rooftop restaurant of an upscale hotel in Los Angeles, sipping her coffee while admiring the city skyline. It was a rare moment of peace in her busy life. Across from her sat Keanu Reeves, his usual calm demeanor making the world seem a little quieter. They had just wrapped up a charity event together, and now they were enjoying a late lunch. As they talked, Sandra's attention was drawn to a little girl standing near the restaurant's entrance. The child, dressed in ragged clothes, peered longingly at the plates of food being served. Sandra's heart clenched. Without hesitation, she called over a waiter and asked for an extra meal to be packed for the girl. However, before she could hand it over, a hotel waitress stepped in, her expression one of disapproval. "I'm sorry, Miss Bullock," the waitress said, her voice laced with condescension. "This is a high-class establishment. We can't have you handing out food like it's a soup kitchen." Sandra's warm brown eyes darkened. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady but sharp. The waitress crossed her arms. "If we start feeding one street kid, more will come. We have an image to maintain." Keanu, who had been silently observing the interaction, suddenly leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. His usually composed face was now serious. "So let me get this straight," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "A paying customer can order whatever they want, right?" The waitress nodded hesitantly. "And if that customer chooses to give their food to someone else, that's their decision, right?" The waitress shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes, but—" Keanu cut her off with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Great! Then here's what we're going to do." He waved over another waiter and said, "I'd like to pay for a full-course meal for every homeless person outside this hotel." He turned to Sandra. "Sandra, do you want to join in?" She smiled, immediately catching on. "Absolutely. Let's make it a feast." The waitress paled. "You can't be serious." Keanu leaned in, his voice low and kind, yet firm. "Kindness costs nothing, but being unkind, that can cost you a lot more than you think." The hotel manager, who had overheard the commotion, rushed over. After hearing what happened, he apologized profusely to Sandra and Keanu, assuring them that the hotel did not support such behavior. The waitress was promptly dismissed, and within the hour, the hotel's kitchen was bustling, preparing meals for those in need. The little girl who had started it all received her food with wide, teary eyes, whispering a soft, "Thank you." As Keanu and Sandra left the hotel, he turned to her with a small grin. "Well, that was an interesting lunch." Sandra chuckled. "I'd say it was the best meal I've ever had." And just like that, two Hollywood stars reminded the world that true class isn't about wealth or luxury, it's about kindness. What do you think? Would you like any tweaks or additions? As Sandra and Keanu stepped out of the hotel, they noticed a group of people gathering outside. Word had spread that the famous actors had arranged meals for the homeless, and many were watching in awe. Some took pictures, while others simply stood there, overwhelmed by the kindness they had witnessed. The little girl who had received the first meal clutched her food tightly, her eyes never leaving Sandra. Slowly she walked up to her and, in a voice barely above a whisper, said, "You're really nice. Thank you." Sandra knelt down to the child's level, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," the girl said, glancing shyly at Keanu, who gave her a warm smile. Sandra looked around. "Where are your parents, Lily?" Lily lowered her gaze. "My mom got sick and we lost our home. She's sleeping near the bus station, but I wanted to find food for her. I didn't eat yesterday." Sandra swallowed hard, her heart breaking at the child's words. She glanced at Keanu, who gave her a slight nod. They were thinking the same thing. "Come on," Sandra said gently. "Let's go find your mom." The three of them walked through the busy streets, past people who barely noticed them. Finally, they arrived at the bus station, where they found a frail woman wrapped in a thin blanket, shivering despite the warm afternoon sun. "Mama!" Lily cried, running to her mother. The woman's tired eyes widened in shock as she saw her daughter being followed by none other than Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves. "Oh my God!" she whispered, attempting to sit up. "Lily, what?" Sandra knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay. We just wanted to help." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. "I never wanted this life for her, but I lost my job and things just got worse." Keanu, who had been silent for a moment, reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Without hesitation, he took out several $100 bills and placed them in the woman's hand. "This should help you get a room for the night. Tomorrow we'll help you get back on your feet," he said firmly. The woman's lips trembled. I can't accept this." Keanu simply smiled. "You're not accepting it for yourself. You're accepting it for her," he said, glancing at Lily. Sandra squeezed the woman's hand. "We know some great organizations that can help. You're not alone in this, okay?" By now, a small crowd had gathered, whispering about the incredible scene before them. People who had previously ignored the homeless were now looking at them differently, seeing their struggles rather than just passing them by. One by one, strangers started stepping forward, offering money, blankets, and even job opportunities. The act of kindness from two Hollywood stars had sparked something in the hearts of many. As Sandra and Keanu walked back toward the hotel, Keanu chuckled softly. "Well, that escalated quickly." Sandra smirked. "You always know how to make an impact." Keanu shrugged. "It's not about making an impact. It's about doing the right thing." Sandra nodded, and reminding people that kindness is the greatest luxury. As they disappeared into the bustling streets of Los Angeles, one thing was clear: their actions had changed lives that day. Not just Lily's and her mother's, but also the people who had witnessed what true generosity looked like. And as for the rude waitress, she was left standing inside the hotel, watching as the world learned a lesson she had yet to understand. True class is found in the heart, not in the wallet. How's that for a continuation? Would you like to add more? As Keanu and Sandra walked back toward the hotel, the weight of what had just happened settled in. They had come for a quiet lunch, but instead they had changed a life, maybe even several. But the story wasn't over yet. The waitress learns a lesson. Back at the hotel, the waitress who had initially insulted Sandra stood near the entrance, still in shock. She had witnessed everything, the generosity, the way strangers had stepped up, and how the little girl's life had changed in just an hour. The hotel manager, who had already scolded her earlier, approached with a stern look. "You embarrassed this establishment today," he said, crossing his arms. "But more than that, you embarrassed yourself." The waitress, still defensive, muttered, "I was just doing my job. We can't have people begging at our doors." The manager shook his head. "Your job is to serve with grace, not judge those in need. If two of the world's biggest celebrities can show kindness without hesitation, what excuse do you have?" She swallowed hard, her face turning red. Then, to her surprise, Keanu and Sandra walked back into the hotel. Sandra, always the peacemaker, approached her. "I know you were just trying to follow rules," Sandra said gently, "but rules that lack compassion aren't rules worth keeping." Keanu, standing beside her, added, "You never know what someone is going through. That little girl, she hadn't eaten in a day. Her mother lost everything. Imagine if that were your child." The waitress looked down, guilt creeping into her heart. Sandra smiled softly. "It's never too late to change. Maybe next time, instead of turning someone away, you'll find a way to help." Keanu nodded. "Kindness is free. You should try it sometime." With that, they turned and left. The waitress stood frozen, her mind racing. For the first time, she saw things differently. Maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong. The ripple effect of kindness. Later that evening, as the sun set over Los Angeles, the hotel's rooftop restaurant had a different energy. The very same waitress, now with a changed heart, did something she never would have considered before. She took a portion of her own tips, bought a warm meal, and quietly left it outside the hotel, where she had seen a homeless man sitting earlier. She didn't say a word, just left it there with a small note. "I'm sorry. I hope this helps." The man looked up, confused at first, then smiled as he read the note. Somewhere in the city, Lily and her mother were safe for the night, and maybe, just maybe, a new cycle of kindness had begun. The end. That wraps it up. How did you like it? Want me to add anything more? 1 year later. The sun dipped below the Los Angeles skyline as Sandra Bullock sipped her coffee at the same rooftop restaurant where everything had happened a year ago. This time she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was Keanu Reeves, dressed in his usual understated style, black jacket, worn boots, and that effortless coolness that seemed to follow him everywhere. Sandra glanced around the restaurant, a small smile playing on her lips. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" Keanu chuckled, stirring his tea. "Yeah, less judgment, more kindness. Imagine that." It was true. Ever since that day, the hotel had quietly changed its policies. No more turning away the hungry. Instead, leftover food was now donated to shelters every evening. Staff members had even started volunteering, and the once cold atmosphere of exclusivity had been replaced with something warmer, something more human. And then there was her. From across the restaurant, a woman approached their table. She wore a crisp hotel uniform, but her face had changed since they last saw her. The former waitress. She stopped beside them, taking a deep breath before speaking. "Mr. Reeves, Ms. Bullock, I just wanted to say thank you." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "For what?" The woman hesitated, then smiled. "For opening my eyes. After that day, I started volunteering at a local shelter. I met so many people who just needed a little help, a meal, a kind word, a second chance." She paused. "I used to judge them, but now I see them." Keanu nodded approvingly. "That's all it takes." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "And I wanted to let you know something. Lily and her mom, they're doing great. A non-profit helped her mom find a job, and they moved into an apartment last month. Lily just started school." Sandra's eyes softened. "That's the best news I've heard all year." The waitress placed the envelope on the table. "Lily wanted to write you both a letter. She says you're her heroes." Keanu shook his head, smiling. "We're not heroes, we just did what anyone should do." The waitress smiled back. "Well, maybe that's what real heroes look like." As she walked away, Sandra picked up the letter and held it between her fingers. She didn't need to open it yet, she already knew what it said. She looked at Keanu, eyes glistening. "You ever wonder how many lives you changed just by being yourself?" Keanu smirked. "I don't keep count." He leaned back in his chair. "But I'd say today was a good day." Sandra raised her coffee cup. "To good days." Keanu clinked his tea against hers. "And to kindness." As the city lights flickered on below them, they sat in comfortable silence, knowing that somewhere out there, a little girl named Lily was smiling because two strangers had decided to care. The end. That should wrap up the story beautifully. What do you think?